Thank you. I don't know if you expected to come to a decentralist tent revival today, but that's what we're going to do. First thing I want to point out is that in the world, but also in particular the United States, we're losing our religion. Church membership is dipped below 50% for the first time. And all this data has been recorded. For many, a source of morality and meaning has been lost. Nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum, and unfortunately too many people are turning to a different kind of religion, the church of politics. This is the church of the one true way, our way or the highway. It is a life philosophy based on domination. Trust the institutions, we're told, which often means outsource all your sense of responsibility to power. The state is supposed to be omniscient and omnipotent. The voting booth is a kind of prayer booth in the sense that you cry your teardrop in the ocean and you expect the tide to turn every 4 years or so. And otherwise, moralistic in-groups engage in these sectarian or partisan proxy wars. We see it online every day. It's tearing us apart. Imagine one day you woke up and you looked at your smartphone and there were two apps on it, the red app and the blue app. This is DOS that we're still living in, the democratic operating system. And I think it sucks, personally. Decentralism is a different way of looking at the world and each other. It's a life philosophy based on consent, the consent of the governed. Where have we heard that before? There is no one true way. There is only pluralism, difference, and experimentation in different ways of life. Authority is something to be questioned and checked. After all, power corrupts, and absolute power. No one is omniscient. Society cannot be planned by technocratic means. We create society when we show up and work together. That's how society is created. So, in-groups, affinity groups, should create peaceful experiments in living. That's the idea of decentralism. Daniel Dennett, in his great book, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, says, it eats through just about every traditional concept and leaves in its wake a revolutionized worldview with most of the old landmarks still recognizable, but transformed in fundamental ways. He was talking about evolution. But he could have been talking about the evolutionary processes in crypto, in this movement. So, I just finished writing a book about this, which will be out in about 3 weeks. That's my goal is to get it out in 3 weeks, maybe a month. They usually say use the law of pi, or you multiply it by 3.14, and that's how long it's actually going to take. But I hope I can get it out in a month. So we're bearing witness. Why should I write a book like this? We're bearing witness to the creation of a worldview accelerated by the promise of technology. And decentralism must evolve as a secular religion in parallel with and counter to centralism. But decentralism is more than just trinkets and tokens and NFTs and yield farming and all that stuff, although that is awesome. It must be about something more comprehensive. It must embody mission, morality, and life meaning. And that's how we together become a cultural vanguard. I'm just a scribe. I can't do it alone. So, I'm going to take you through a brief tour of the book, but I want to note that I've hand-drawn some fun little images that'll go in the book. And this is to sort of establish a more intimate connection with the book, but also to the wider decentralist movement. So each image will be represented and linked out to an NFT. If anybody buys them after buying the book, they'll go to my nonprofit, Social Evolution. And our mission is to spread the ideas of decentralism. And as more people read the book, they'll be interested in NFTs, but also first movers on the book will be encourage first mover readers. So I'm trying to establish a nice synergy between worlds. And I'll speak more about this at the end. So here's the tour of the book. I start off in the introduction asking what it is we all share. What is it that we all want as human beings? And I think it's one of the most complicated answers, but perhaps one of the simplest paradoxically as well. We all want happiness, fulfillment, life meaning. Everybody on earth wants that for themselves and their families, their friends. And indeed, I want it for all of humanity. I believe that this unites us. This, if anything, unites us. And that, I believe, requires a peaceful revolution. Decentralists seek a global society based on consent, which will amount to different societies, but all of them coexisting peacefully. If a consent-based order was never possible before, you guys are making it possible through technological means. But we are under no illusions. Whether or not they use the red app or the blue app, the decentralists want to control us. They want you to live by their conception of the good, not by yours, and not by those in your affinity group. Thus, we have to understand underthrow. And I'll come back to this concept in a minute. Two hands. If we have anybody from China in the room, please, help correct my language on this. But I use the metaphor of Bao Quan Li, which is the fist-wrapping rite in martial art. It comes from the East. And I believe this metaphor captures two major mechanisms of social change in the world, the two active mechanisms of social change, compulsion and persuasion. That's all we have. That is the only two means at our disposal, are persuasive means or coercive means, compulsive means. Bao Quan Li, the fist-wrapping rite, says that wisdom and restraint, the open hand of persuasion and wisdom, restrains the powerful fist. That's why when you bow in martial arts, you'll often see this configuration. So restraint begins with what is called the three governors. This is not for me. This is ancient. It comes from the Vedic traditions. We're all familiar with it. But the idea is that we have to better align our cognition, our emotion, and our intuition, our head, heart, and gut. When we don't align, so we become susceptible to fear, and that there's a fear industry out there. We've all seen it, and it makes us go crazy. Okay, so aligning our three governors through conscious and continuous practices is absolutely important to being decentralists. Okay, this is not just individual dynamics, although that's where it has to start. It's also in group dynamics. So if you have a bunch of head people in your organization, you should probably find some heart and gut people. The heart people are relators. They know how to relate to other human beings really well. Gut people know how to lead. They're going to be out front going, come on, guys. You need all the head folks. Well, there are tons of them here. And it's blowing my mind. I'm learning so much. But we need all of these in alignment, internally in alignment on our teams. Speaking of susceptibility to fear, there are four primary forces in us and therefore in society that we have to look out for. It comes from the basic masculine and feminine energies, and both masculine and feminine is in all of us. So this has nothing to do with endocrinology, gender, sex, all that stuff. This has to do with basic forces within us all. And each of the masculine and feminine have generative and destructive aspects. Okay? Those map onto a matrix whose mantras are basically exert control, end it now or burn it down, let things flow, and let things go. These forces are out of balance. We have been too long in the first two, in the masculine paradigm, of exerting control and ending it now. That is what our society is essentially based on, is dominance hierarchies. Dominance hierarchies are created through this idea of exerting control. It's not to say we need to completely get rid of that. It means to say we need to bring the feminine into balance so the feminine energies can ascend. Crypto ecosystems are designed to facilitate free flows, and they support the ascent of the feminine that needs to come into balance against this masculine urge to control that predominates in society. Once we have our shit together, it's time to start disrupting. In these 5 areas, which I go into in detail in the book: governance, finance, enterprise, aid, and defense. I can't go into these all here, I don't have time, but suffice it to say, underthrow is one of the primary mechanisms that we need to use to disrupt in these 5 major areas. We need to create overwhelming value in the alternative system. That's step 1. You guys are creating value in alternative systems every day. And you know that you have to do that and be customer focused about it in creating value for your counterparts or your users. We need to expose the diminishing benefits of the status quo. We need to reduce switching costs between systems. Make it easy for people. Don't just design things for geeks. Design things for people like me. Change people's perceptions of the alternative. Market. Show people how much they're gonna love it as they opt into it. And continue to create value within the alternative system, okay? That continuous creation of value within a system attracts new participants. Now, this, I believe, is the most important part of the book, and this is what, to a great extent, we've lost as people have lost their religion, is their morality. And I don't want to come up here and sound like a preacher too much, but let's enumerate these 6: nonviolence, integrity, compassion, stewardship, pluralism, and rationality. These are important values that must be restored, must be respected, must be venerated, and not just venerated as abstract rules that you pull out of the sky from time to time, which is a very Western way of looking at morality. We need to turn east and see morality as conscious, continuous practice. These 6 spheres are to be practiced every single day in thought, word, and deed. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras said ahimsa, that ahimsa is to be practiced, and there's a guy who interpreted Patanjali on the Yoga Sutras and talked about the monks in the meditation forest, that the cow and the tiger would drink from the lake next to each other because the monks in the meditation forest radiated nonviolence. And we must as well. But in practicing, in moral practice that must happen every day, we have to use ritual sometimes. Ritual is wonderful. There's a reason that religions of the world have ritual. And part of it is to find the space, okay? Viktor Frankl spoke of between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In that response lies our growth and our freedom. And of course, he was a Holocaust survivor who developed a whole set of ideas in psychology and a whole set of practices. But to find yourself in that space requires practice of its own, and I offer 7 rituals that will help anyone, I believe, do that. Prayers, acts, and symbols, all of which can help get us into the space, which helps us align the 3 governors and begin to go out as sovereign entities into the world and make change. Despite some of the connotations of elitism, of stage theory, I think we have to acknowledge that people can level up in their cognitive and psychosocial development. And by leveling up, I mean continuously improve, but sometimes that improvement will take us to new stages entirely. And as we adopt value systems with these stages, people will tend to cluster in them, okay? But all of these stages are important in different life contexts. So we must respect and venerate all these value systems, especially as orders of their own. So I build these in as orders to be respected and venerated, all value systems. And yet, we're trying to achieve a level of, because our life conditions are becoming so complex, we're going to have to adopt the systems of higher order complexity in our values and in our cognitive capabilities to the extent that each of us can in our own constraints. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be good at yield farming. tokens, but maybe someone can teach me, but I don't know. But that cognitive, I'm going to have to ascend cognitively to get into that. Likewise, I'm going to have to ascend spiritually and in my moral presence of mind through conscious continuous practice. The 9 principles, the more of these things that chapters have packed into them, the less I can talk about as I near the end. But the major punchline here is that, the major couple of punchlines is that there are basic economic fundamentals that we can't miss. And we must respect economic realities, including the limits of formal hierarchies, that they themselves have baked into them certain limits on scarcity, information problems, for example. So the major punchline here for the meta punchline is that the systems of entrepreneurship and innovation that give us better, faster, cheaper stuff can also give us better, faster, cheaper governance systems. We're starting to see that in the DAO space now. And it's a beautiful thing. It's going to show the world the way we self-organize as peoples. So we go from being subjects to being citizens, and that was a pretty good leap. And it sounds bourgeois as hell, but we need to go from being citizens to being customers. In other words, we need to learn how to serve each other better in our governance systems. I know that sounds crazy, but like when you're making a DAO, you're going to have to figure out how to bring good people in and keep them. And that's an entrepreneurial effort. Okay? Finally, the 10 keys. What's the meaning of life? No, everyone has a different answer, but there are a set of processes for discovering life meaning. And I talk about that in the book. Because this is really what it's all about, folks. This is what we all share. So the plan. I'm going to launch the Decentralist book. NFT images in the book will link to dedicated NFTs, and those will eventually grant access to a decentralist DAO. But I need help, right? So the mission is going to be spread decentralism far and wide. But I've got some challenges. I'm not an uber geek, right? So first thing I want to do is find thoughtful decentralists who share my values and my hopes and dreams. Second, form a proto-DAO, for example, on Discord or Telegram. I understand that that's a good next step, like a good intermediate step. And then structure value into DAO access NFTs and organize a campaign for that express purpose. So our basic whys. Do you want to seek happiness and life meaning? Do you want to ascend together as cognitive and moral beings? Do we want to live in peaceful, sustainable societies built on consent and mutual aid? Do we want to solve the world's problems together? If your answer to those is yes, I hope you'll contact me. Please, you can either email me, use the Twitter handle, or I would love it if you gave me your information where the QR code is. It's an opportunity to give me your name because I will reach out to you. And thank you so much for listening.